doesn't. Well done, Manchester United.
It's a Sheringham, and Solskjaer has done it! Van der Sar saved it! United again! Ready! A magnificent goal by Robin van
Persie. Welcome to United Hour, your official Red Cafe podcast for all things Manchester United. I'm your host this week, Nick.
I'm Alex.
And I'm Raess.
Yeah, three of us here. We're recording one day after the Arsenal match. We were actually supposed to record last night, but just didn't feel like it at all after another kind of deflating performance. But yeah, there has actually been three matches since we've last recorded, so it's not all doom and gloom. Two pretty good wins against Burnley and Newcastle. And we are still sat in fifth place somehow, even after this loss yesterday. I had to go and check the table myself and say, has this actually been updated? We've lost and we're still in fifth place. But yeah, Alex, I've not actually done a podcast with you all this season, I don't think. Have I? You were on for the first time a couple of weeks ago.
Been avoiding each other, I think. Must be.
Yeah. Well, that was the full-on Ole Out show you were on with you, Coleman, Raess, and then, yeah.
We had a great time, yeah.
And then, I think me and Colm had a more kind of balanced discussion on it last week. And then, obviously it's been the crazy Christmas schedule where, we did want to try and record something before the new year. But, it didn't happen because we've all been too busy stuffing our faces, I guess. But, look, 3 matches, 2 wins, 1 loss. Last night, obviously we lost this game. We're not happy. We're not a good performance. I kind of said that to me it just felt like a bit like Groundhog Day to the Watford game where we just really didn't turn up, and before we knew it we've kind of lost already and didn't really do that much to get back into the game. But I don't want to totally dwell on the one match, but obviously we have to kind of go through and work out why were we so poor after 2 decent kind of performances. So I don't know what I think that just down to tiredness really, and I think one thing that maybe Ole can take some criticism for is not rotating enough and trying to freshen up during this period, because there's been a lot of players who I think have played far too many minutes. Partly that can be put down to us having a thin squad and some injuries, but I think there was a few players who I would have liked to have seen a bit off during these matches, and I just think we looked tired and out fought all the way through really. I don't know if you guys agree with that. What do you think, Alex?
I think the rotation point's a fair one. I think a few people, including yourself, pointed that out in our last Europa League game and then the League Cup game as well. I think that was against Colchester, was it?
Yeah, that League Cup game especially, I was a bit surprised in how strong we went against like League 2 opposition, but I still think we're kind of paying for players like especially Maguire, Rashford, who've played ridiculous amount of minutes.
100%. And having a thin squad is somewhat by nature of Ollie's philosophy or his plans for the team, or this rebuild that he's on. He wanted to have a thinner squad. He wanted to let some players go and work with a smaller group, and that's fair enough. But if you're going to do that, particularly in a year where you have Europa, you do have to prioritise much better than perhaps he has done. I would say that it is somewhat Groundhog Day with Watford, in the fact that for me, it felt that Watford and then Arsenal, neither of those teams had to be particularly good. Arsenal were definitely improved and had a bit more impetus and a slight kick up their arse with Arteta's appointment. But in all honesty, I didn't really feel like they ever had to get out of second gear. It didn't feel like we ever put them under a great deal of pressure, and I didn't think they had to work particularly hard or play particularly smart to get in front, to extend their lead and then to retain that advantage. That it seemed like that was pretty easy for them. And with Watford, the bottom team in the Premier League at that time, it's not acceptable to be complacent, but I guess you can understand it to some degree. But I can't imagine or offer the excuse of complacency against Arsenal, because to me, away at Arsenal, regardless of the time of year, that shouldn't be a game that's difficult to really get up for, regardless of the circumstances, the wider, context of what's going on. A game against Arsenal should be an incredibly easy one, especially, Ollie has spoken in the past about the incredible games and matches that we played against Arsenal, how they were such a tough rival of ours. It felt like a game that he should really be able to gear the guys up for.
Yeah, but nowadays they're hardly like, those big rivals and whatever. And they're actually like more like mid-table opposition, which is kind of part of the problem. It's actually quite sad that, to see. I think both us and Arsenal are currently in our worst Premier League seasons so far, like, the halfway point. Kind of similarities there. And yeah, from the Watford and Arsenal games, both those teams are on kind of that new manager bounce where then both at home where the players just seem to give that little bit extra. And yeah, we just weren't keeping up with it at all, really. I mean, did you see anything different, Reese?
In what sense?
Look, it was saying that, a lot of it comes down to tiredness and just...
I disagree with that, by the way.
Well, you should have started with that then.
I think the tiredness point is a fair one. I think one thing I do feel sorry with regards to Ali for is what really can you do with that squad in terms of rotation? I mean, I know there's some younger players' names being thrown around, but would that really change the nature of the results that we're speaking of? I don't really think so.
But we're not talking about changes made to this game. We're talking about changes made in previous games that would have enabled those better quality first 11 players to have felt fresher, right? It's not. It's
I
not about...
I understand that, but I'm just saying Ollie's in a difficult situation with that squad, the size it is, and you mentioned that he's put himself in that situation, which is again is another fair point. I'm just saying now that he's made that call, it is very difficult to pull off good quality rotation and keep up, maintain those level of performances and maintain level of results, which is why we're seeing such topsy-turvy form. We're seeing sometimes, a lot of the fans think, oh, Ollie in 2 weeks in a row, we've got to win. And then you see an absolutely disastrous result coming in. So I think tiredness and the nature of the squad plays a big part in that.
Yeah, well, that's it. That's my main kind of point on my main reason why we're kind of so poor in this. Is also, some credit to Arsenal. Like I say, they have had a kind of reaction under Arteta coming into a slightly new style, and obviously, the players are all giving that little bit more, as we see time and time again under new managers. But yeah, I didn't actually think Arsenal were so great. I just thought in the first half we were especially poor, really, giving the ball away a lot, just not managing to get going at all. And I'd say, like, the players that I see that have just played far too many minutes. I was actually looking at some of the stats of who's played, and Harry Maguire is probably the outfield player who's played the most minutes in the whole Premier League this season. If you look at the top, there's a couple of others, but they're from teams that are not in Europe, like Sheffield United. So there's no way that they've played as many minutes as somebody like Harry Maguire, who's also played Sheffield United. Plus, we've gone semi-finals of the Carling Cup. So yeah, the rest are all goalies. So yeah, he has actually had the most minutes of any outfield player basically so far this season. And there's been a lot of talk from some people talking about how, look, he's not really performing as well as we might have expected. He's had a couple of like slightly nervy, maybe dodgy performances. And I was trying to kind of work it out myself, because early in the season I thought he started really well. And I think a couple of podcasts ago we had on Scottish David from Canada, and he was kind of picking out maybe that, Maguire's not really been as good so far as we might have thought. And I especially think that maybe on the captaincy side, maybe it's weighed down on him a bit. Jan, do you see him that he's not been good, or do you put it down to the tiredness? What do you think about that, Reese?
I think he's a bit overwhelmed with the move to United. And I think giving him the captaincy has overwhelmed him even further. I mean, you've got to realise this is a guy who his rise in the game was very rapid in terms of he was a bit of an obscure player who, people said he had promise and potential, but it's only with that form with England he's gone from almost like a nobody to an £80 million superstar defender. And that weighs heavy on a player of his ilk. Now, I think from what I can see, I see still a talented player there, someone who will hopefully become an established first team defender, a primary defender, someone who can control that defense. I do think he's got that in him. I just think the environment around him at the moment, the manager he's under, the players he's around, the culture, it's all not right for him to reach his potential. I think United are that type of club now where even when they sign good players and good signings, these players end up looking awful. And I just think he's a victim of that rather than not being good enough himself. I mean, you just need to look at him on the ball sometimes. You can tell the technical qualities there. He's just not exploiting it. It's like he's playing within himself. And even defensively, he looks anxious. But I know from watching him in England, I know that he can be a top defender. So for me, I've got full faith in him and I've got patience in him. I just think until the club's deeper malaise doesn't improve, we're not going to see the best out of Harry Maguire.
One thing I would say about Maguire is that I think at least I have seen that he's trying to take some responsibility to bring the ball out. Maybe he's not having that much success with it, but you do see him really trying to push it on, coming out of the defence. He has even taken some stick for it. I've seen on some threads on Red Cafe where people are saying, he's holding on to the ball too much and trying to do too much. But yeah, I think at least he is trying to take on that responsibility. But I do kind of agree with that.
Yeah.
That maybe it's been too much too quick for him. And especially, like I say, I was not that surprised when I saw that he's just played a crazy amount of minutes this season and definitely is like top of the list of needing a rest. I mean, again, maybe our injury situation is the problem because, if Tuanzebe or Rojo were available, possibly we might have seen some rotation in that central defensive area. But I think it's only Phil Jones who's an option at the moment, and maybe Ole's been a bit reluctant to throw him in there after last time he played.
I was just going to touch on 2 points which you mentioned. One is the lack of rotation and the other is his supposed ball hogging that we've seen him being accused of. Now, if you look at Van Dijk, right, for Liverpool, he doesn't get rotated often because he's a pillar of that Liverpool defence and they need him, right?
Yeah.
But the difference is that Van Dijk can almost cruise through games because the team's set up so well that he doesn't really need to do much in possession. So a lot of people talk about Van Dijk being this brilliant ball-playing defender, but if you actually watch him on the ball, he doesn't really need to take that many risks in possession, nor does he need to ball hog because he can just spray out to Trent, spray out to Robertson. Wijnaldum, Fabinho will just come in deep and collect the ball off him. The team's a well-oiled machine. Compare that to what Maguire's having to go through. It's a completely different ball game. So the fact that he's got the courage to try and get on the ball and make things happen should be applauded because, in my opinion, for a ball-playing defender, United is the worst team in Europe in terms of top teams to be a ball-playing defender at. So it's the toughest position to play
right now.
So we need to have sympathy for Maguire, in my opinion, because any top ball-playing defender would struggle in that United side if they were trying to take on as much responsibility as he is.
Yeah, I think all that is fair. I think one thing I would probably add is that, in all honesty, I think Maguire has definitely shown in the past to be more capable off the ball and more composed on the ball than he has shown for United. But I would also say that, there were many people who felt that he was a signing by default rather than necessarily who we needed. And I think actually what we've just done there with Van Dijk is the obvious comparison to make. He is, the yardstick to measure against and a player who walked into that Liverpool team and took them, it seemingly took them from being a team who conceded a lot of goals and made a lot of defensive errors to being one that's considered to be solid. In actual fact, there are a lot of other, tactical changes that were made. The inclusion of Alisson in goal, Fabinho in front of him, which I appreciate came a little bit later. But still, there were many other changes. And when you've got Luke Shaw struggling on the left, and then at the left, a changing position with 3 players rotating in that spot, essentially all with incredibly varying styles. Scott McTominay in front of you, and when he's not there, no real protection being offered through the middle. A partnership with Lindelof that is clearly somewhat struggling. I think they're probably perhaps too similar a sort of player for me. You don't really have that yin and yang that you might typically expect to see with top central defensive partnerships, where one is maybe there to cover and to hold and to be stronger in the air, and the other is perhaps to be a bit more composed, to press and to intercept. You don't really have that, and for me, they're just two players who are both good, capable defenders, but not perfect. Both of them are fairly weak on the turn. Both of them are known to make mistakes at this point. So the combination of the two, and then with a lacking in confidence De Gea behind him, yeah, you're right. It's just not a setup that facilitates success in any sort of way. So, I feel like him coming in, being asked to be this 80 million huge price tag solution to all our problems, as well as being the leader and the pillar of that defence, whilst really, clearly a player who has potential rather than being the finished article, and then being put in this setup which doesn't really enable the best of his abilities, it's a huge ask. So, I do think the criticisms are fair, but there's definitely context behind it which we can, offer some sympathies
Yeah,
for.
if we look at that Arsenal game, that first goal, I mean, whose fault do you think it is? It's definitely just like poor defending in general. I mean, I've watched it a few times, and there's Kolasinac goes in, and Lindelof is kind of tracking him and seems to decide to play offside, but Maguire's not in tune with him at all. So there's definitely a major communication issue there. That's what it looks like to me, that Lindelof thinks he's playing offside, but yeah, Maguire's playing him on. And really, shouldn't that call be coming from Maguire anyway, seeing as he's the captain and the one who's looking at the play from furthest back? I mean, being a centre back, for me, it should really be coming from Maguire, that call. So yeah, I don't know whether Lindelof's taken that on himself, or it's difficult to know without knowing exactly who's made which
Yeah.
calls, whose fault it is. But yeah, it's general disorganisation in the defence that leads to that first goal, really.
Well, there's also a lack of communication between Wan-Bissaka and Lindelof, who's going to go out to the man, who's going to cover that area, and I think Aubameyang it is who pulls Wan-Bissaka in instead of Wan-Bissaka passing him on. They're both kind of telling the other to go to the man or to mark that space. For me, Lindelof kind of ends up in no man's land, and I do think, in all honesty, Maguire is slow to react, slow to get out, and maybe perhaps either slow to make the call or whoever responsibility that needs to be. But that, I guess, for me, is the sort of isolated situation that you perhaps can put down to fatigue and tiredness, and for me, probably mental fatigue, a lack of mental focus, so much pressure on him, so many games being had over this Christmas period. That in that one moment, there's clearly lack of communication from a number of people and a lack of a quick reaction, which has unfortunately ultimately cost us. And they got a bit lucky with a deflection, but then for me, we kind of created our own misfortune and bad luck with a player in no man's land who to me was also a little bit flat-footed when that ball came in, and yeah, got punished for it, I guess.
Yeah, no, look, it was a bad start, and we didn't really recover from it for that whole half. And I was actually not very confident about this game already, because I was kind of expecting Arsenal to come out pretty strong with the newish manager playing at home. And yeah, for me, the midfield was the biggest worry, because obviously we'd lost McTominay, and he's going to be out for a couple of months apparently. Then yeah, there was quite a reaction to hearing that Pogba had not travelled with the squad a day before, and then all sorts of conspiracy theories then doing the rounds when it's talked about the fact that, yeah, why is he not there? And some people think he's already signed for Madrid. I mean, yeah, I think I've said myself that I think a lot of this is total bollocks personally. And as far as I can see, he's had a major injury and his recovery from it has not gone very well. The club's now talking about him having an operation. Yeah, I would say there was one slightly strange comment that Ole made when he said that it's Pogba's people who've decided that he should have an operation. It was a slightly strange comment to make, almost like suggesting that it's not
Yeah.
necessarily the club's decision. But yeah,
Is that not true of all big players?
yeah, I think nowadays, yeah, players, they do have their own medical teams
Yeah.
and they work with the club's teams. I think then Ole was asked about this and again, and he did kind of clarify saying, no, look, it is the club who's kind of being in charge of having these scans done. And then, yeah, I think that is just the way a lot of these things work nowadays, but it just came across a bit strangely when the comment was made. But yeah, that is how to me, he had a major injury. He was on crutches. He was in a cast. You don't recover quickly from that. And then, he was thrown in. In fact, it was that Newcastle game on Boxing Day where McTominay got an injury but kind of ploughed on till half time. Pogba then replaced him, came in for the second half, and then neither have been seen since Boxing Day. Basically, both out injured. So I was pretty worried about our midfield. It was going to be Fred and Matic. In the end, bizarrely, I actually thought that Matic last night was probably the best of a bad bunch of players for us, and actually thought he was one who was actually doing all right in midfield, keeping hold of the ball, actually passing a few players, even made a couple of created a chance or two that we could have done better with. There was one that Andreas thought should have done better with when he did quite a nice little ball through for him over there. So, but we're going to be relying on them, it seems, unless somebody comes in as a new transfer, because we're not seeing Pogba or McTominay anytime soon, it seems, and I certainly do not want to have any ideas of going back to Pereira playing in centre mid, because he was awful there when it happened a couple of months ago. But the January window is open. I personally don't like to talk too much about transfer rumours and all, but it seems that midfield is obviously going to be top of the list for looking at. Who can come in there, I don't know. There's already names being thrown around, but we'll see from there. But what do you think of all this kind of Pogba conspiracy theory stuff anyway? Like I say, I get a bit tired of all this and think there's a lot of just bullshit. But Alex, what do you think about it all?
I think the his people thing is a strange comment from Ollie to make, but it's definitely true of big players these days that they've got their own contingency. They've got their own contingency plans, their own team in place, their own people, and they're going to trust those people because those people are dedicated to them and ultimately have their long-term interests at heart rather than being conflicted with the club's best interest. So I think that's fair. It was just a bit of a strange comment. I imagine that essentially means that, there's a case of whether he carries on playing and the timing of this operation. Does he have it now or does he have it later? And for Pogba, in all honesty, I would expect that for him, in the grand scheme of his career and where he would expect to be, he may well see this season as, for me, a little bit of a write-off. Now, by that, I don't mean that he doesn't want to play and he doesn't want to win games, but I mean that he's thinking, if there's an opportunity that he does move in the summer and goes to what he would consider to be a club who are elite in this moment, who are challenging for titles and hopefully challenging for the Champions League, you would expect that he would take the hit now and sacrifice himself now for the next few months with a United team who aren't challenging for those trophies. And taking that hit. I think it's essentially just a case of we all expected that he would probably move on after 3 or 4 years. That's the nature of the play, but in all honesty, the vast majority of players. And you would also expect a player of that quality and standing and with those ambitions to probably want to be at a club that was challenging. So I can completely understand if he wanted to move on. For me, when he does play, I think that he turns up as often and as consistently as you would expect for a player who's playing in a team that has the problems that we have. And I think that the only reason that his inconsistencies get called out as much as they do is because, one, his personality, two, his agent's comments, but three, the fact that we do pin so much of our hopes on him. Similar players of a similar quality in other clubs who have other great players around them don't get the same level of criticism. David Silva's not having a great season at Manchester City, for example. If De Bruyne went a game or two without playing particularly well, because they have other players who are able to pick up that burden and take on those responsibilities, then it's not really noticed to the same degree as it is with Pogba. So I think he's probably looking to go. I think the beginning of the end for him has been coming for a while, and I would expect to see an exit. But I can totally understand, one, why he'd want to leave, two, why, if there was an operation to be had, he would want to have it now. And no, I don't think that he's, feigning injury or anything like that, because I do think that he's a diligent professional and has shown that throughout his career.
Yeah, that's pretty much, I'm agreed on that. And unless Roos, you have a totally different opinion, I think maybe do you?
Fucking waste man, bro.
No, no. I just think He's too good for the club in terms of talent at this moment in time.
That hurts.
And in my opinion, when he's fit and on form, he should be the best midfielder in the world right now, because with Modric aging, Cruz not really having the same desire he once had,
cruising.
The only player who's on his level in terms of talent is probably someone like Verratti, who's had his own share of problems of reaching his own potential. Pogba's in a similar boat. He should be the world's best midfielder, and he needs to be.
Do you not count De Bruyne as a midfielder, or what
I'm
exactly?
Talking centre mid.
Central,
centre
yeah,
mid.
okay, yeah.
De Bruyne's in a world
But
of
if
his
Pogba
own.
came back into our team, do you think he'd play? We talked a lot about him playing that number 10. I guess at the moment, with players out, he would come into that centre mid. But, we had been kind of lining up for saying, oh, we'll keep with that McFredder midfield and that he's going to play a bit further forward, maybe in a similar-ish role to where you might see somebody like De Bruyne. But I guess anyway, it's all irrelevant now because it looks like he's going to be out for another month or so at least.
Yeah, just to briefly touch on that point. I mean, I get what you're saying, and I do see him as the more attacking of that trio. It's just Pogba plays a different style to De Bruyne, in the sense that De Bruyne is literally like a free roll in attack, whereas Pogba, even if he was the most attacking mid in a trio, just his sheer nature of wanting to be involved with every facet of the game, he'd end up operating as a central midfielder in an attacking midfield role rather than like a pure number 10. But yeah, that's besides the point. But yeah, I do think we're probably going to see the last of him now. I think he's going to have the operation, and then we won't really see that much of him in a United shirt. And I think for him, it's the right thing to do, because he needs to get himself right for Euro 2020.
Yeah, and I do think it's a huge shame that,
Yeah, it's massively frustrating because, I was talking about this a lot just on the last pod with Com, saying, look, he's finally back. And, I personally, that's one of my big reasons why I feel that, things have gone how they have this season, and why Ole deserves more support, because he's absolute vital player to his whole plan, the guy who could unlock those defenses that we've really struggled with, where we've always had our worst results. Whenever we lack creativity, for me, every time it comes back to him. And yeah, we've pretty much not had him for the whole season, more or less. Yeah, what's he played? Like 3 or 4 matches, like barely even. And yeah, that's where, it's almost amazing to me that we're still in like 5th position and in a shout with still being in top 4, even though he's not been there the whole year. And I think people forget that a lot, and there's not much, some people might say that, yeah, well, we should have replaced him before, should have other options, and that is a fair criticism. But then, yeah, you get down to a conversation about whose fault it is on whether players are coming in. Is it on Ole? Is it on Woodward? And yeah, probably in another week or two, when some of the transfer window action starts happening, we can talk about that a bit more, because there's not really that much to discuss on it at the moment. I mean, yeah, just trying to finish off with the Arsenal match. I did think that we came out a bit better in the second half, but it's to be expected that Arsenal at that point are 2 up and are going to let us play a little. Just to talk about Arsenal's second goal, actually, yet again we're conceding from a set piece. So, as we talked about,
to Arsenal, right?
Well,
like I'm sorry, but conceding a set piece to Arsenal is separate from conceding a set piece against any other team. I would say, like, it should be in a bracket of its own as something that should just never be allowed to happen, and is completely unacceptable and inexcusable. Because how do you concede? Well, a corner. Sorry, how do you concede a corner to Arsenal? Unbelievable, Arsenal.
it was actually like pretty good
Arsenal.
movement from Lacazette for it. But yeah, again, it's our defenders who are letting us down. And I've seen a bit of criticism for De Gea. I don't know how much better he could have done with that kind of flick coming at him, to be honest.
I haven't seen it again, but I typically think, and I appreciate it's probably, it's come at him close to him, but he's a keeper, paid a lot of money for his incredible cat-like reflexes and quick reactions. He doesn't seem to have to really stretch or anything for it. It's kind of to his body, no? So to me, if you're not really having to stretch for it, and does he not get both hands to it?
Yeah, it's just more the kind of speed and how
if
late
you
you see a ball
get
like
both
that.
hands to it, I feel like it's strange to not be able to catch it or push it upwards or something. I don't know. Maybe it's I'm not an expert, and I feel like that sort of chance doesn't happen often. But I feel like the reason I don't know what I would have expected him to do, is because usually the keeper just catches that and it's not an issue, but maybe that's just ignorance on my part.
Yeah, and as well,
I just think he.
go on.
Sorry, I was just going to say I just don't think he gets a firm enough contact with it. I thought it was poor goalkeeping. I don't think De Gea in good form does that. I think he gets enough of an impact with his hands just to push it out, whereas it's a weak contact with his hands or his fists, and yeah, it's not good enough in my opinion.
Yeah, no, fair. It is difficult to say with those because, you don't have the goalkeeper's view. You don't know exactly, there's a few players between him and Lacazette who's actually heading it. Or at what point does he actually see it, get it? How far, who knows? Yeah, but yeah, it didn't look great, to be fair, the way he dealt with it. But at the same time, yes, coming in fast, so it's difficult to deal with. But yeah, look, in the second half, we played a bit better. Created the odd half chance, but not really anywhere near enough. And as I say, that game kind of fizzled out. And for me, it was just, kind of identikit deja vu of the Watford match. But yeah, like I say, I don't want this to be a totally depressing podcast because in fact we have had 2 pretty good wins since we've last recorded. So yeah, 3 matches, 2 wins, and as I say, Newcastle, Burnley as well. Those the exact kind of away games we've been dropping points in lately against those bottom teams, and yeah, both matches in the end were pretty easy wins. I mean, we started that Newcastle game quite badly, and you were worried that it could have gone the same way as the loss that we had to them earlier in the season. But yeah, thankfully, Steve Bruce went back to his usual way of giving us the points as he normally has done time and time again. But yeah, look, like I said, for me, I always want to make sure we get the bigger kind of picture and not just focus too much on the latest match, even though it was a bad one.
Nick, if you didn't get the memo, the 2 wins against Newcastle and Burnley don't meet mine and Reese's agenda, so we were hoping we could just skip over those.
Yeah,
please.
no, I'm gonna focus on those Boxing Day and in fact I was really annoyed because normally I live down in London nowadays, but yeah, I'm always back up north for Christmas, but this year for various reasons
Glory unto
this year for the various reasons I wasn't, and I missed that Boxing Day game, whereas I'm always usual really happy and it's one of my rituals. But yeah, for the first time in a long time, and yeah, it was the one that you really wanted to go to this year. 4-1. Good attacking performance, goals from Rashford, Greenwood, Martial, and some really good goals as well. And in fact, 2 from Martial and 1 from Burnley. And we had been giving him quite a bit of stick just a couple of weeks ago, and really talking about whether we will think he was adapting well to this number 9 role or not. I mean, to be honest, even though he has scored those goals, I still do have an issue with him playing that centre forward number 9 role, and I don't think he's so suited to it. I think he's doing an all right job in out of position as far as I'm concerned. I mean, Reese, you weren't on the pod when me and kind of Colm were discussing that. What do you think about Martial's best position and how he's adapting to number 9?
He's a problem for me. I mean, this is someone I've been a massive fan of for many years, but even though he's come into good form in the past few weeks, my issue is tactically, he's a difficult player. He's someone who I've always not been a fan of sticking him as a left winger because, in my opinion, your wingers should be one of the most energetic players in the team, purely because they're going to have to go up and down that flank. Whenever they have the ball, you're expecting them to run at players. You look at all the top teams over the past decade or so, their wingers are super energetic, as well as getting goals and assists. But the main attribute they should have is that ability to constantly, as soon as they get the ball to feet, run at a player. Whereas Martial has these issues with sprint endurance where when he's in the mood, when he's got his wind in him, he can take on anyone. But then 5 times out of 10, he'll not want to run at someone because he's feeling a bit tired, so he'll just go for the easy option. Whereas someone like Rashford, who isn't as refined with his running with the ball, has that energy you'd associate with a wide man because he will constantly drive with the ball. So in essence, he's more suited to a wider role than Martial. Now, then when you look at Martial as a striker, it's almost like he still hasn't got enough dynamism even for that role, because what you want from him is those dynamic little movements just to constantly leave a defender, get into space and constantly link up play like you'd watch Firmino do for Liverpool. But Martial's quite lazy. He just stands still And when you're playing against defenses which are tightly packed, he doesn't have enough movement to unsettle those defenses. Whereas on the counter attack, he's fine because he can find space more easily. So he doesn't have to work as hard to find those spaces. So that's the big issue with him at the moment. It's his movement off the ball when he's up against tight defenses.
Yeah, no, and that's it. You have to learn, that kind of the runs you make, how you hold off players. The amount of times this season we've had very good balls put in across the 6-yard line, and there's been nobody anywhere near it. Is just shows where we have been deficient in the strikers making those runs to finish off those kind of balls. I mean, I think I saw, it was Gabriel Jesus for City scoring a kind of goal where I just thought there's no way our strikers are going to be making that run to make that ball, even if James makes the cross. It's just not going to be happening at all, and that is a big issue, and it's why I think we'd been linked a lot, of course, with like Haaland, who's now moved on to Dortmund, which some people were kind of expecting him to come to us. I didn't actually, especially with his dad's history of having played with City, had a major kind of fallout with Roy Keane, and as well that I think his son's openly admitted that he was a big Leeds United fan growing up. So I kind of didn't really think that expecting to be coming here, but I think that Norwegian connection with Ole had a lot of people talking about it, and I think we definitely were interested and had a chat with him. But I'm also don't think. I mean, do you think if Haaland had come to us that he would be an automatic starter? I'm not even sure about that. I mean, it's actually, we had a few questions this week, and that would nicely actually move on to it. And I think this comes from Myoni Solskjaer. And he says, do we persist with Martial and Rashford as our main front guys? And are they going to be our next main front guys for the next 5+ years? I mean, for me in football today, it's very difficult to think anything 5+ years in advance, really. Even thinking like 1 year in advance is kind of long-term planning nowadays. But look, Rashford, I think, is really cementing that kind of left attacker role, has been thriving in it, and it's going to be very difficult to move him out of that position now because he just really seems comfortable there. He's having his best season ever. All right, he had an off day yesterday, but again, like I say, the amount of minutes he's played recently is crazy. And he's him and Maguire are the two top of the list for me, who are like desperately in need of a rest. But for me, I still have big question marks over Martial as at number 9. And those are the two areas that if we're looking to strengthen, that I think, we do need to. And as well, I saw that we'd been linked in the summer with Mario Mandzukic, and he's moved on already as well. And I actually thought that kind of signing that's obviously doesn't fit our young British new philosophy at all, but even if it's just a short-term stopgap signing, somebody who's kind of happy to come in from the bench, has a bit of experience, offers something totally different, I actually think somebody like that coming in is more, I wouldn't mind that at all. We don't have every player need to be like big signing that's going to be in the team for the future. We're linked with whatever your Sanchos and Maddison and Grealish and whatever. And I would love to have any of these players, but I think probably realistically you're not going to get any of them till the summer. Even if there was some kind of more short-term older guys or loan signings, I think we just need some more numbers in the squad, really.
I mean, I think there's a few questions there, to be fair, so I'll try and unpick them a little bit. So on Martial, I'm with Reece. My issue with him is, to be honest, not really when he's on the ball. He's got great hold-up play, and when he is in the mood for dribbling, he's, as Reece said, incredibly refined. It is that off-the-ball work that's the issue for me. And in terms of where we stick with him, I guess the problem that I've got is that if we have those elite ambitions again, or working towards that, for me, while Martial has the talent to be in a club like that, I don't think that he has the mentality. And people say, "Oh, can you imagine Martial under Klopp or Guardiola?" And I'm thinking, but they wouldn't put up with this need that he has to play the numbers and only make runs where he feels that there's going to be a reward for him. Football's all about risk versus reward. The more risk you put in, the more chance of reward there is. And he doesn't make those sacrificial runs and movement often enough that, 9 times out of 10 are going to get nothing, and you're probably not going to get noticed. But that 1 in 10 time you're there on the end of a ball and you're scoring and the goals in the back of the net, he doesn't do that for me. And that would be why it would be hard for me to pin all of my hopes on him longer term. I think Rashford, we definitely need to continue to put time in and stick with. 5 years is a long time to consider, but I think if the club was to move to a director of football model, or at least a model where we had clear KPIs identified, a style of football we wanted to play, I think looking at players across a longer period, regardless of what manager comes in, because we know that the managers who come in, we're going to discuss those ambitions and those plans with, and they're going to be on board, becomes much less of an issue. So Rashford definitely, Martial for me, there's quite the question mark there. If we can change that mentality that he's got, then perhaps. On Haaland, I don't think he would have come in as a starter, and I do actually agree with you that someone like a Mandzukic perhaps would have been better, because we wouldn't have been putting all our longer term eggs in a basket that may never fulfill. And also, for me, two things. One, Mandzukic or someone like that experience becomes ultimately immediately offers as a plan B that we clearly have not had since Ollie's come into the club. We haven't had a plan B, and they would offer that. You know, they're bigger players, they've got experience, they're canny with defences, even things like pulling shirts and getting physical, but also being on the end of balls, scoring set pieces, and so on. It gives us an alternative option. But also, if we are wanting to think about longer term, and Ollie is putting a lot of focus on youth, perhaps we need to consider the development of Greenwood. And whilst we're not able to, pin all our hopes on Greenwood anytime soon, because there's still a long way to go, and we've seen how players as talented as he is haven't made it, you also need to enable a path for him to get a lot of minutes, to work his way into the first team, and to have Haaland, two players who you identify as probably becoming a single striker in that forward position. That to me seems to be perhaps a little bit of a conflict there. So I was a little bit conscious on that point too, I would say. And I think the whole time that Ollie's been here, we haven't yet seen a striker succeed. So maybe the tactics that Ollie's played don't really play to a striker's strengths, or really showcase them as a star player. You just mentioned that Rashford's had a great season. Well, he had a really poor spell of form where Martial was out and he was in the number 9 position. So for me, that's quite a problem area for Ollie, and I'm somewhat sceptical of our ability to play someone there who isn't experienced and isn't already a top player to really go in and make a difference in that position.
Yeah.
Reese?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one, because with United's history of poor management choices, it's tough to then pass that judgment on these two by saying we definitely shouldn't build the club around these two, or we definitely should. So for me, I hold my judgment on that. What I would say is, as of now, am I convinced that we should 100% hand the keys to the future of United's attack to these two players? For me, no, because I think they both need to be tested. They both need to be made to feel slightly uncomfortable, but not in a way like Mourinho did, where you've just been a dick to him. I mean, make them feel uncomfortable in terms of bringing in players who are competition for them, making them play in a modern philosophy, which is actually imitating the likes of Liverpool and Man City now, and challenging them to meet those expectations, and saying to them, look, basically saying to the whole club, not just these two, but look, we're Manchester United. We aim for the very top, finishing top 4 and thinking you can be as marketable like Jay Lings or whatever it's not the right culture here. We want to aspire to be the very best, and to play for Manchester United, you need to be the best in the world, or one of the best in Europe, to play in your position. It shouldn't just be given to you. So even though we're looking at Rashford playing well this season, we're looking at Martial doing all right over the past month or so, we need to match these players and compare them to the likes of Mane, Firmino, and we need to be brutal about it, because if we don't, then we're being nice to them. We're being, we're not really telling it like it is. And that's the truth we need to ask ourselves. Are these two players going to be as good as the best in Europe in their position? As of now, I would say it's uncertain because until we don't give them the right management, the coaching, we won't really know how good they really are. So I would not say, no, they shouldn't be playing at Manchester United. But what I would say is they shouldn't be guaranteed stars going forwards.
Yeah, no, as I say, look, for Rashford, for me, I don't think we could have expected any more from him this season so far. And I know
Of course not.
I'll remind you for a lot all this season, Reece, that you were very, very critical of him earlier in the season. And you have kind of retracted some of that criticism more recently. But yeah, you weren't the only one. And yeah, I mean, I actually remember being in the ground, and it was one of the first times in a long time that I actually had an argument with somebody in the ground who was slagging off Rashford. It was a Europa League game against Astana, maybe, something like that. And I don't even know if he was playing that day, but anyway, yeah, I think he was, and he was getting slagged off from a few people, and people start talking and calling him Trashford and things like that, and I'm like, come on, this is just absolutely ridiculous. And yeah, I'm really glad that he's actually come through and has been bang on form now for a couple of months, and doing very well for my fantasy team as well. So yeah, happy to have him in there. Martial, like I say, still a bit unsure about. I think we all agree he's got masses of talent, but yeah, what exactly his best position is and if we're utilising him in the best way, not sure about. But yeah, as I say, in these 3 games, he has actually scored 3 goals, 2 against Newcastle, 1 against Burnley. But then, yeah, there is other days where you just don't see enough from him at all, like yesterday was case in point. And yeah, then you start feeling a bit frustrated. But yeah, look, let's see from there. I mean, yeah, if we go to a couple of the other questions, referring back to the Burnley game, we had a question from Bastian, and he said, do you guys agree that Ole should be protecting players like James much more instead of just saying it's a man's game after some really thuggish performance like Burnley? I mean, yeah, the one thing I will say about James, and yeah, he has actually been relatively off the boil a bit for the past month or so, but every game he seems to get wiped out at least 2 or 3 times. Absolutely just destroyed, smashed into hoardings, thrown down the side if there's a running track or something. And I think it is partly because of his speed that, players just catch him and then he's going at full pelt. But I'm sure he's taken some pretty bad knocks and bruises, and that a lot of the time he's not really in peak physical condition. And yeah, again, playing quite a lot of minutes, although yeah, he has actually been one that has been rotated a little bit, to be fair, so has been rested here and there, but he's still played a lot of minutes for his first kind of Premier League season, also always playing in those Wales games over there. But yeah, it also, this kind of question does go back a bit to a bit of a discussion we've had and definitely disagree about Ole's press conferences, where I start seeing him getting quite a lot of stick about things that he's saying in press conferences. And for me, I personally am not that bothered about what he says in press conferences and don't think it matters much at all, especially that I almost think it's a good thing that he's being quite kind of bland and just trying to put a positive face on everything, because he is having to kind of repair all the damage that Mourinho did for those couple of years, where he was just week after week saying things that I just felt embarrassed about and just said that was very negative for the club. He was always kind of protecting himself, making it about himself. And for me, as a Manchester United fan, a lot of the things Mourinho was saying, I just could not agree with and just thought it was toxic, poisonous stuff. So yeah, for Ole to go all the way the other way. And yeah, I do actually agree that often he's quite bland, doesn't actually say that much. And, he's not one of these big kind of characters. We've had Louis van Gaal, Jose Mourinho, where people actually tune in just to watch their press conferences. And yeah, you're not going to go out of your way, to be fair, to watch an Ole press conference. But I do think that people just analyze too much. And this week people say, oh, Ole's smiling in the press conference after we've lost. How can he smile? And you're one kind of shot is taken out of context in a whole 10-minute thing and thrown around Twitter that, oh yeah, he's happy that we've lost and ridiculous stuff like that. But yeah, like I say, this question, partly it's about James and how much he's getting beat, but partly it is a question about what Ole says in press conferences and how much you think it matters.
It is. I mean, the smiling thing and how dismissive he can be of poor performances and not just for me subpar performances, subpar output, but also subpar input for me in terms of sometimes maybe I appreciate these are buzzwords, but effort and dedication, looking to be the first to the ball, chasing the game, really throwing the kitchen sink at it at the end when you're behind, having bravery and courage in your and conviction in your decision making. For me, how blasé he can be on that stuff is incredibly disappointing, because that, and whether you want to include the smile or joking or anything in that, I don't really care, but that is kind of at conflict with the United narrative that 90s and noughties Fergie team consistently and repeatedly even now put out about themselves. I don't think Roy Keane was in the studio for this one because it was BT, but had that been Sky and Roy Keane have watched that interview, would he not have been someone who was going, why is he? I would try and do a Irish accent, but I can't. If someone can, please do. If only Colm was here, but he'd be saying, "Why the fuck is he smiling? Why is he smiling? They've just lost to bloody Arsenal for Christ's sakes, and he's smiling, And he himself and players of that era, I think, especially if it wasn't Ollie, would be saying that sort of thing about him, because it does seem to be at odds with the, cold-hearted. Ultra winners that players of his time at United are often cited to be. For me, the media is a tool to be used, and perception is reality when it comes to your use of the media. If you're not saying anything or anything of real substance, like not saying anything is saying something in itself, if that makes sense. And the lack, like I say, the lack or the blasé nature that he has to subpar input does really, really frustrate me. On the James thing, for me, James is consistently getting up and continuing to make those runs, which is why he's probably repeatedly getting pulled back down. So whatever Ollie's doing on that front is working, because you do need to continue. You can't let it get to you. You can't just sulk in a game if someone's bringing you down or a team's being a little bit harsh. So whatever he's doing, rather than being arm around the shoulder to James, he's perhaps being a little bit tougher with him. It's working, so fair play to him on that front. But to me, he clearly does use the media to what he considers to be his advantage. And that's by not saying a great deal and to be making excuses and to be managing expectations, which for when he came into the club is something he definitely wasn't doing. He was talking about how United need to be winning, how United need to always be challenging, how top four wasn't good enough, how we had the players to be going for those sort of results. And yet, as soon as he got the job and as soon as he started to struggle himself, those aren't the noises he seems to be making anymore. There's no longer talks of mountains are there to be climbed. It's, oh, there's a rebuild and it's going to take a long time.
Yeah, but that's the reality though, isn't it? That's the reality. This summer it's been a total reboot, it's a restart, so it's a total different situation than when he first came in. He came into a season where he still had a possibility of winning things that season. We were still in the Champions League. We were still we're getting back towards top four. So yeah, and he's trying to, of course, build the confidence of everything, the fans, the players, everything.
Yeah.
So but then this summer is a totally different situation. So
it's a reality that we're not. It's a reality that we're not challenging, and that there needs to be a longer term view. But that doesn't mean that he's not massively behind expectations for this United team with the investment that he had, right? I appreciate that you can say we're still fifth, but let's be fair. The league is clearly weaker on points, on win percentage, and on almost every other metric but position in the table. We are clearly massively underperforming, right? Would that be fair to say?
Well, look, I don't know, right? At the start of the season, if you'd said to me, okay, we go into the start of 2020
with a loss to Arsenal,
we're fifth place, few points off top four. We're fifth place, few points off top four. We're in the League Cup semi-final. We've qualified in the Europa League. I probably would have taken it. I didn't have huge expectations for this season. I did think we'd be in the top four around now, and I think if we'd had better luck with injuries, we would be. That's what I think. So yeah, I think my expectation is probably around where we're at the moment.
I don't think there's anything wrong with having that expectation. I think we both share the same prediction level in terms of what we expected from the squad. But my ultimate goal is obviously I want to see United back on top. So that's why, as much as I had the same expectation level as you, I obviously want to see us get back on track to being the best in the world. So when I put that hat on, then what I'm looking at right now is still not good enough, and nor do I see us on the right track. That's the big issue for me, I think, because I'm still looking at the bigger picture of how we get back to the top, and
yeah, well, you know,
still think we're far away.
Look, that leads on to, we also had these questions, and obviously it gets on to the questions about Ole now. So yeah, I mean, okay, yeah, big question is, do you expect the results would be significantly better if we had a new manager? Now, Alex, I think you were probably
No.
Ole out, even though you hadn't been on the show, and it'd been a while for maybe Colm to go that side, and I don't know, Raess has been slightly sitting on the fence, but more towards a kind of maybe it's time for Ole to come outside. But yeah, I think you were actually much stronger nearly from the beginning of the season, right? Saying that you didn't think he was the right guy.
Yeah, I never felt he was the right guy to begin with. I never felt that he should have got the job. And as I said on a few podcasts ago, I think he's actually kind of been put in a unfair and potentially to him damaging position. What I have always said though is that if there is a genuine plan where they've got a clear idea of what success looks like, and success isn't necessarily winning a great deal of games. And it's also not about performances, because for me, they have also been incredibly lacking, but it's about other key metrics in terms of the development of youth, the development of key players who we see as the future of, improving the defence by whatever percentages on certain statistics, goals conceded, shots, I don't know, whatever it needs to be. If there is this clear plan in place that the club is going to and is very keen to stick to, and regardless of what manager is brought in at what point, they'll be looking to continue with that plan. Then actually, I can somewhat understand continuing with Ollie, because whilst I don't necessarily think that Ollie is the right plan, I think that the plan should be much bigger than the coach himself. And if that is the case at the moment, then I don't mind the coach continuing in that role for the time being, because if you just, reset and reboot every 18 months, 2 years, then you're never going to transform. You can have this
Yeah, the thing I
transformational
would on
plan.
that I would like to say that I don't think Mourinho ever had a full kind of reboot of this kind of style. He never did, right? Because he is actually one of the reasons that we ended up with a massively bloated squad. He never got rid of a
Yeah,
lot of players. We
sure.
had a huge squad where there'd be like pretty big players who weren't even anywhere near the team, and he brought in others as well. But we never had this complete kind of clear out restart. Van Gaal did to some extent and tried to. He got rid of quite a few players, changed the big philosophy. So
Yeah.
I don't see that Mourinho ever did the same kind of thing. And
No, I would agree, and I didn't want Mourinho to be in the job when he went either. In fairness, so yeah, I guess there is a part of me that would say, I can't see behind the scenes. I'm not. The club hasn't been transparent in what that plan is. They've been disappointing in their lack of hiring of a technical director or director of football. But if the plan is bigger than the coach, and if there is the plan that actually we're building for the next man, and we're looking at identifying who that man is, and we think that that man will being able to hit the ground running as a result of the groundwork that Ollie's putting in, then okay, fine. But for me, Ollie isn't going to be the long-term man to take us to success. Essentially, is where I'm at. I wouldn't actually say that results would be a great deal better with someone else. I think they would be better, but not a great deal better, because there are clearly limitations in the squad, and I also think that there's a deeper cultural issue at the club that needs addressing. But I do think that we would perhaps be seeing more consistency in the performances that would lead us to believe that there was longer term success to be had, which I think is what I feel is really lacking with Ollie. We don't see that consistency in patterns of play. We don't see that we're really strong in these particular areas and weaker in others. Week by week, we just seem to fail in different ways. there doesn't seem to be any
I don't
real
think we fail in different
strategy.
ways. We fail in the same way. We fail in the same way again and
No,
again.
I don't know because where we've got possession of the ball, we don't create enough chances and we struggle to break down deep line teams. Fine, I accept that, but I guess what I'm saying is that at the start of the season it looked like we were strong at the back and we'd pulled to that gap and we're laying foundations, but actually now it feels like we've gone completely backwards and are looking incredibly fragile. So it feels like we're not actually plugging any holes or solving any problems, I guess is what I'm saying.
That actually is a very valid point about the defence. And, it's something I remember at the start of the season when we were struggling to score goals. We were saying, yeah, but look, the defence is looking really solid. I mean, I will point as well to when players like McTominay are out is when you really realise what you miss is when he's not there. And, we said that
100%.
before. I'd say Matic at least is a lot better than when Pereira was playing there. It was really the worst possible option we could have. But yeah, he's nowhere near on kind of McTominay's level. And yeah, we really should be looking at bringing in anybody in now. But yeah, I do generally agree with what you just said. If the question is, do you expect the results to be significantly better if we had a new manager? I personally don't, because I put a lot of the issues down to having a weak squad, injuries, and yeah, any other manager is going to have difficulties dealing with that themselves.
Yeah. I mean, I do think he's created some of those issues himself. He created a situation where he was very reliant on Pogba and also a McTominay who hadn't yet proved himself as being what he's become this season. We're kind of
But then isn't that
looked
something
out
he
a
has
bit.
to get credit for?
Yeah, maybe, yeah, maybe fair point. I guess you can look at that both ways, but also we became incredibly reliant on him, and he gets injured, and we're in a sticky situation. So yeah, both ways. There's credit and less so that can be given there.
I mean, yeah, that does then lead on to the other question, which I'll put to you, Reese. It says it's from Pseudo Canadian. Beside Poch, who's the obvious choice, which manager could United realistically bring in if we sacked Ole now? I think the only other name that had been thrown around a little bit a couple of months ago was Allegri, but I don't know.
No, not for me. So I would recommend Brendan Rodgers.
I don't think even though look, he is a very good coach. For me, I just would struggle.
Wasn't Busby a Liverpool player?
Undoubtedly got very good managerial ability. I still will always struggle with the how much we selected. But I guess actually it's not that different to Mourinho. We had Mourinho after slagging him off even more for years and years. But yeah, go on anyway. Rodgers.
Yeah, so Brendan Rodgers, Tuchel.
Okay.
And I had one more on my list. Struggling. I'm obviously
Frank Lampard, surely.
Frank Lampard, definitely. I love Lampard as a manager.
Is that a joke or not? I'm not sure.
No.
Not sure.
I genuinely rate Lampard very highly.
But he's obviously never coming to us. So yeah, and they're saying who's a realistic option right now? Is Tuchel a realistic option? How's he doing? What's his position?
Well, I think he's gonna obviously have this season to have a shot at the Champions League, and I reckon if he doesn't get it, he'll probably be looking elsewhere. But if you look at the way PSG play beautiful football. He's someone who comes from that Jurgen Klopp style and philosophy. And he's very charismatic. He's someone that connects well with young players. He's good at putting together a philosophy of football and identity. So he's definitely someone who, if he's free, would definitely be up there. For me, those two are the two main names I can think of apart from Poch. I'm sure there was one other name that I was thinking of, but I've lost it off the top of my head. If you guys can try and help me out.
Wenger?
What do you say, Alex?
Wenger.
No, Wenger's definitely.
I'm glad that you sent that question Reese's way, because he's much more the football hipster than I am.
Yeah, look, for me anyway, the number one choice as a Pochettino, and even though I'm strong keeping faith in Ole, I've always been a big supporter of Pochettino, and because he is available, that is one of the only reasons that I've even slightly wavered in my strong support for Ole, because yeah, I kind of do have part of me thinks, are we going to miss out on somebody who I would have liked to have seen as our manager for sure. But yeah, for me, as I said previously, I still would like Ole to be given this window now. I know it's always a difficult window, but yeah, there is still players making moves. So yeah, I think if nobody comes in this window, then that really is time that I think we will start seeing some of like Old Trafford and all, some more kind of protests against Woodward, the Glazers, things like that starting to happen. Because there's been a lot of talk about this as well on Red Cafe. And there was a thread a couple of months ago where people were saying, look, when will the match goers start turning and protesting? Because there'd been a lot of stuff on Twitter earlier in the season, but it hadn't really reflected at Old Trafford recently. And mostly this season, I think people wanted to stay positive, support Ole, and they still do. The ground in general is still very much in support of Ole, and in fact, even more so than I thought. I think I mentioned a couple of months ago, I saw a poll on a more kind of match going forum, and it's something like 70-80% of people are still totally behind Ole. But yeah, there's of course a totally different perspective where a lot of blame is put on Woodward, the Glazers, for failures in the transfer market, not bringing in a director of football. But yeah, obviously the window is open now, so it's all about the transfer market. There's going to be a lot of focus on that. And yeah, for me, we have to bring in one minimum, ideally two players, and even if they're like stopgap kind of loan signings, for me that's okay. I don't expect to be making like players who are coming straight into like the first team, and for a 5-year plan you're not always going to be getting these. And Fergie as well bought in players sometimes only for like 6 months just to like fill a gap and see where we go from there. And yeah, there's nothing wrong with that when you need it. And I think right now we definitely need just more numbers in the squad, because I think, as you say, Reece, when we talked about, with slight criticism saying he's not rotated, but then who was there who could have come in and changed that much? Maybe Greenwood could have played, but really, is Mata going to make that much difference? I think the only other one that there is some chat about and then growing discussions about online as well is where people are getting a bit frustrated with Luke Shaw lately and saying, we want Williams to be starting more and more games, and I think Williams definitely deserves more game time. He had a really good game in that Christmas period. I did actually defend Luke Shaw in one of these threads, saying that, look, he's still a vastly superior defender to Williams, that, Williams has a lot to learn. And there was that match, I can't remember, I can't remember which match it was, but there was a match where he was at blame for playing everybody on side. And when there was a goal, it might have been Bournemouth or somebody like that. I can't remember which game it was now. But yeah, we lost the game, and the goal was when he'd been playing everything. And you're going to get that things when you've got teenagers playing who are not in tune with everything. But attacking wise, he's just vastly superior to Shaw. The amount of times I think Shaw has opportunity to be crossing and playing balls, and he's just going for safe options of bringing it back inside, is really starting to annoy me now. And the lack of kind of creativity from our fullbacks is one of our major issues. I'd say that Wan-Bissaka has been slightly better in that. He did get an assist in this Christmas period.
He had 3 good crosses in the last couple of games.
Yeah, exactly. I think he has actually been improving himself in that play. But yeah, from Luke Shaw, we're seeing very, very little from like attacking. And in that Arsenal game, there was 2 or 3 times where I just said, look, whip the ball in, or he's got past somebody, try and take him on. But yeah, instead he comes back, plays it inside, and they're often just like pointless as well, like 2-yard little passes that are just a waste of time completely. And he's just playing way too safe for me. And he's going to need to see more from him. Or let's get Williams in the team. Yeah, why not?
Yeah, when it comes to Luke Shaw, I've lost hope in him for years. I mean, I know he comes back in from injury and he has 1 or 2 good games, but he's not good enough at this level. He's just not. Yeah. He's not fit enough. He's not dynamic enough in attack. Defensively, I've always said he's quite rock solid, but even that against Pepe, he looked absolutely exposed against Pepe in the last game. That's the worst defensive display I've seen from him since he's probably been at United. So if he's not even offering that, he's offering nothing. For me, I've always said we should have gone out there and signed Ben Chilwell, someone who is a modern day fullback, and he would give us such an engine down the left, and he's capable both ways. For me, Luke Shaw's era at United is 100% should be over. I'm still shocked that someone that overweight can play for Manchester United. It just symbolises everything that is wrong with the club. Players like that should not be allowed to spend that many seasons at a club where they're underperforming and that unprofessional.
No, and to be fair to him, he has had a lot of injury issues, and I think partly he's never quite recovered from those couple of very bad injuries he had. He's never really been the same player. As I say, I still do think he is a good defender, but attacking wise, he's just offering so little that it is becoming a major issue, especially in this kind of style we want to be playing, where we want to.
You can't have him and Wan-Bissaka. That's the problem, because they're both defensive-minded fullbacks. And I'd rather pin my hopes on Wan-Bissaka being the defensive force of the two fullbacks that you have. So the other one needs to be super dynamic and attacking to balance it out. And there's no balance there.
Or overlapping centre backs, Sheffield United style. maybe that's the answer to all our problems. Overlapping centre backs, right?
Well, look, as I said, Maguire was quite happily pushing forward and almost overlapping a few times yesterday in the second half. Yeah, like I say.
Or maybe we need some of those Phil Jones marauding runs from 10 years ago back, or 6-7 years ago, I guess. I don't know how long now.
Yeah, look, why not? Like I say, Maguire has been pushing way more forward than we're used to seeing our centre-backs going. You never would have seen Chris Smalling coming anywhere near that far in years before. So, yeah, he's at least confident to come out that way. So, yeah, I mean, looking ahead, our next two matches are actually cup games. We've got Wolves in the FA Cup, and then Carling. I still always call it the Carling Cup, but yeah, the Carabao Cup semi-final against City. We're at home first this time next week. It's two-legged, so yeah, we will have to go the other way as well. I say this every year and get a lot of stick of it, but I actually don't care about this FA Cup game at all, just because I think we've got such a thin squad with so many people needing a rest and so many games coming up. I would be quite happy to play a heavily rotated team at Wolves and not too bothered if we go out of that, because I think we should be definitely focusing as that Europa League comes back again and try and get this league form coming back again. I mean, where are you two guys on the FA Cup nowadays? I've taken some stick for this kind of opinion in the last couple of years, but
Yeah, we have to be looking to win something. We need to make sure that we retain some form of winning mentality at the club. We have to make sure that there's some relief for the fans, but also ideally for Ollie, that if he is here till the end of the season, ideally he would win something. Right?
Yeah, but we don't have a squad to be fighting on four fronts. We just don't have it.
Yeah, I mean the League Cup is probably the one.
Yeah,
but we're already so far into that you have to go for it now. But I guess the thing for me is that the Europa League is such a poison chalice, because it's the worst competition. It's the worst competition to be in unless you win it. And if you win it, it's amazing, because the reward for winning it is huge. A spot in the Champions League for in a league where now there are 6 or 7, truly top squads who can compete for 4 spaces. That's fantastic, as well as being, a somewhat very respectable European trophy. But if you don't win it, if you get to the final and don't win it even, it's utterly draining and the worst competition to be in. So it's this poison chalice, which is really incredibly hard to balance. So I personally would be saying, no, we need to go to the FA Cup. We need to be trying to make sure that there's some form of winning mentality in this team and give that relief to the players, to the fans, and to the coaching squad. But yeah, when you're trying to battle for Europa League as well, and it's so important that we win that competition, that surely has to take some form of priority and precedence, right?
Yeah, definitely. Like I say, our squad is too thin to be fighting on 4 different fronts, and the one that has to go is the FA Cup. As I said, I have given Ole some criticism myself for playing 2 stronger teams in the cups this season.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the reasons where I think a lot of the games we lost came after we'd had like decent big midweek performances. Yeah, thinking back to losses like Watford and Bournemouth, where we'd come off like midweek games and they'd had a whole week to think about it. And yeah, for me, that was a lot of the reasons that we were sluggish in those matches and ended up losing them. So yeah, you can't have it both ways. You can go far in those cups, but then if it's affecting your league form, it's a big problem. So yeah, for me, I'd be quite happy to go out the FA Cup at this point. Reese, what do you think about that opinion?
I always am of the opinion you fight on all fronts.
But don't you think that if we try and go all out to win the FA Cup, that it's going to kill us somewhere else? You can't
Well, quite frankly, I think we're going to lose anyway. So I don't think it's going to be an issue.
Well, then it's even more reason to play the reserves. If you play your full team, get them all knackered, go out anyway, then it's absolutely the worst case scenario. When you've got to play Manchester City in a big semi-final just a few days later, then I kind of...
Yeah, of course, you've got to be sensible. So in that situation where you're closer to winning one title than the other, 100, I have to agree with you. You have to put out a weaker lineup, and it's not because you're trying to tank a competition. It's just the smart thing to do. You've got a local derby semi-final versus a competition in which there's a lot of rounds still to go. It's common sense to put out a weaker side for the FA Cup, because the proximity between the games is too close to warrant putting strong teams out for both cups. So I don't think it's something that you should be criticised too much for having that opinion. I think it's quite a common sense view to take, and I'm sure a manager in that situation would take a similar approach.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see what Ole does. Like, he has really played quite strong teams throughout these cup matches this year. Of course, he had a chance to play very weakened teams in the Europa League because we qualified early, and that was good to see some of the young players there. And yeah, maybe we'll see some of them this weekend against Wolves. Let's see. And then in between those two cup semis against City, we've got Norwich at home, Liverpool away, and Burnley at home. So yeah, another pretty interesting run of games, and
then it's not long till Europa returns, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And there's no real rest till the end of the season.
Yeah, that's it. So where you get a chance to give anybody rest, you don't know. But I would like to see Ole give a bit more time to some players, whether it's like Garner coming from there. As I say, I think if players like Tuanzebe had been fit, we would have seen them getting a lot more minutes, and it's one of the reasons players like Maguire and Lindelof have had to play nearly every match. So yeah, that's partly down to it. So we'll see how we go from there. We'll try and probably come back after that City game, hopefully, in a week's time or so. Thanks to all the questions we had this week. Helped me kind of fill out the show because I'd had not much time to prepare for any of this. Do please...
Could really tell.
Hey?
I said you could tell. Obviously, I was joking.
Yeah, look, there's too many games this Christmas time, too much going on. But yeah, this is our first pod of the year, and let's see where we go from there. Yeah, I was pressed to say we're now on this Big Heads Media Network, and we need to give them a bit of a plug because they're helping us push the pod and improve some of the kind of back admin side of there. So yeah, if you guys can go out there and give us a review, anyone listening on Apple, those iTunes reviews help us a lot. And please, share on Twitter and stuff like that always helps us out because we're really poor at the whole social media side of stuff and probably need to start getting a bit more professional at all that. But yeah, I think we've had a pretty civilized chat here, Alex. I was expecting you to be bringing your Ole out placard and fighting a bit harder for that. But yeah,
I've been sticking pins into a Ole doll that I've had since a young age all episode.
So you got all that out of you already, have you?
Nah. Like I said, I actually feel sorry for him in a lot of ways. But yeah,
Yeah, I think we're all kind of agreed that he's in a difficult situation. And I said myself that, the coaching could be improved. But I don't really see that now would be any benefit to changing. But this window is going to be a very big one for what happens for this rest of the season because I don't think we've had a window like this in a long time where we are so desperate for reinforcements, especially with McTominay and Pogba now looking like being out for quite a longish period. Midfield and up front for me are those areas where we definitely need somebody else coming in. And then I think we can have a good crack at getting back into that top four, maybe Europa League, and hopefully a trip to Wembley for the League Cup as well. So still plenty to play for in 2020. I think I was pretty upset a few weeks ago where Colm said he thought the whole season was already a write-off because I said, look, there's still plenty to be playing for over here, and there's no way writing off this year just yet. So let's see what the rest of 2020 brings us. Thanks to both of you guys, and I think like I say, we'll be back this time next week after the first semi-final against City.
Wicked.
Looking forward to it.
All right.
Love you all.
Love you too.
Oh, I meant the fans, not the listeners, not you guys.
Yeah. Happy New Year to you too.
Yeah, I thought you meant that as well.
All right, yeah.